Hi guys. Often when we look at history, it's easy to dissociate our ancestors from ourselves, like they were from a different species, mysterious and fundamentally unknowable. But from time to time, an historical anecdote appears that shows us otherwise. Today we're gonna talk about Dom Duarte I, the Portuguese king who suffered from depression. For a bit of context, we learn about Duarte's depression from the work Leal Conselheiro, a book written by himself on how to be a good person, a good Christian, a good nobleman and king. It's not from an indirect source that we learn of Duarte's affliction, but from the man himself. During the Middle Ages, medieval Portuguese kings were generals, fighters, a fundamentally Gallic group. But during the 14th and 15th centuries, a shift happened in Portuguese nobility, much like the rest of Europe. Knowledge is power, and possessing knowledge is no longer exclusively the domain of the clergy. Dom Duarte is not the first Portuguese monarch to embody the enlightened king trope, but is the most notable, since he was, at heart, also an artist. To understand why such a promising, talented, and gifted king became afflicted with what we would call nowadays depression, let's dig in deeper. During the early 15th century, the Portuguese crown had been focusing on expanding the kingdom by sea, where the Portuguese would carve a prosperous, totally not morally questionable mercantile empire. This expansion proved to be a gigantic endeavor, and was too much for a king alone to deal with, and so he looked to his son, Prince Dom Duarte, to help him rule, manage both the kingdom at home and the expeditions at sea. This took a heavy toll on young Prince Duarte. I would argue that it was this sudden and enormous pressure put on Prince Duarte that made him falter and succumb to depressive episodes. But to understand better what he felt and how he himself described it, let's take a look at Leal Conselheiro. We believe Leal Conselheiro was compiled around 1438, but it contains sections that were written in earlier decades. This work is a collection of essays that has a lot to say about society, the Christian faith, about the three socialist states, their rights and duties, and the collective Portuguese identity and mission, so it comes as no surprise that it is written through a medieval Christian moral and ethical perspective. But we can't focus on all of that right now. I'll be focusing on the introspective parts, where Dom Duarte gives us a glimpse into his psyche, the moments where, as he put it, he fell victim to a melancholic humor. This is the term he uses to refer to his depressive episodes, and I find it has a very poetic vibe about it. Dom Duarte opens the chapter with the following quote: "As I know that many were, are, and will be touched by this sin of sadness which precedes ill will, that is presently called the disease of the melancholic humor." He suffered from this disease for 3 years, recovered by the will of God, and hopes to teach and guide everyone else who feels this way. He describes how at only 12 years of age he was entrusted by his father, King Dom João I, with administrative tasks, meetings, councils, audiences from the moment he woke up until he went to sleep. He tells us how he did not even go hunting or walking through the woods, which is a big deal since we know he was very fond of hunting and had a very respectable KDA. I can only imagine what it was like for the servants to deal with him during the times he secluded himself in his chambers. "My lord, the Duke requests an audience with yourself, prestigious prince."
Get the fuck out of my room! I'm playing Minecraft!
During this time, he occupied himself with meetings and sulking around alone in his chambers. This made him feel alienated and isolated, but as he argues, he assumed it was a natural change that came with becoming an adult and that everyone experienced this. By now, we can clearly relate to several feelings and thoughts presented here. A feeling of isolation in his work, feeling like everyone must feel this way and that it is normal or not bad enough to complain about, sickness of the mind impacting physical health, falling prey to negative thoughts relating to his role in the world, and the enjoyment he should be getting from his labors but wasn't. I find it fascinating how many of these feelings I have felt in the past, proving that these feelings have been around possibly since the inception of our species. I have experienced depression, and a Portuguese medieval king who lived 600 years ago has felt the very same feelings I have. It makes me happy to see the universality of human feeling, something that connects us to our ancestors. Duarte spoke with those around him, namely physicians and priests, and amongst the advice he received was drinking unwatered wine and sleeping with women. I want to take a moment to focus on how fucking metal it is that the advice he received was really drinking and fucking. That's some pretty good advice, not gonna lie. Except he was 12 years old. Just another giant win for Christian morality, I guess. Yeah, I know different eras have different moral standards and even demographics change drastically, but I can't miss a chance to bury that knife a little deeper. You don't matter anymore. Shh. Go to sleep, my little genocidal empire. Shh. It's okay, baby, let go. Shh. He goes on to say how he repressed the way he felt, and also felt he could not talk about this with other men of his position. But then something happens. His mother got ill. He proceeds to tell us that it was in taking care of his mother that he managed to distance himself from his own feelings. And this was the start of his recovery. By feeling the pain of his mother, he stopped feeling his own. This is another point that brings us closer to them, the universal feelings of love between a mother and a son. This is how Don Duarte begins to overcome his melancholic humor, with effort, patience, and hope, by accepting his pain as a decree of God, and by continuing to do his duty, as any good Christian should. He continues by telling us, although after I suffered with sad illness for 3 years, not as harsh, but every time getting better, never though feeling a single pleasure reach the heart freely as it once did. Now this is paraphrased, and I'm really not making justice to how poetic and talented Duarte's writing is. It really cannot be left unsaid how much he contributed to the establishment of the Portuguese language, called linguagem at the time, which roughly translates to common tongue. Now, Duarte's chapter about his melancholic humor is about to end, but he summarizes how he overcame it in a neat little paragraph that also summarizes this section of the video. Although I understand that many in what I have written and had right, even if by misguided reasons, feel the sadness, they should, with the grace of God, employ effort, advice and warning, with a great part of good hope. Take it from your favorite internet raccoon and from that medieval king you have only just learned about. The road to overcoming depression is an arduous one, and it is one that is arguably never over, but with active effort and hope you can overcome it. If not by the grace of God, like Duarte advocates, then through the grace of whatever gives your life meaning. That meaning is real, and you can capture it and put it in practice. I promise. Now for a more historical comment, it's amazing how the realm of human feeling is universal. It breaks through the constraints of time and space. Getting to glimpse history like this is a precious thing. It's examples like these that make me love history, how these sources prove the one universal truth, that our ancestors were human, that we are fundamentally linked to them, that they were not a primitive step in the evolution of what we have become, that they lived, loved, felt, and suffered in much the same ways we do now. Thanks for watching.